Hello again, class, and welcome to our Hamlet Act 1, Scene 2 review. All right, so Act 1, Scene 2 opens with Claudius addressing everyone. For the first time since he and Gertrude have been married. It's the first time addressing them as king, too. If you look at his opening speech in Act 1, Scene 2, he seems, and one of the themes in this play is seeming versus being. Things are not always as they seem. He seems, right, to have Denmark's best interests in mind, to have Laertes' best interests in mind, and in some ways to have Hamlet's best interests in mind, right? So the speech opens, I'm sorry, that scene opens, excuse me, with Claudius saying, I know we're all sad, but it's time to move on, right? And he uses all of these figures of speech, right? He says, though yet of Hamlet, our dear brother's death, the memory be green. Now, he says the memory is green. Now, green means what? Fresh. But it also relates to nature. When we think of the word green, you think of plants and things like that. So what he's saying, he's saying that the memory of his death it is fresh, but it's also his death was natural. These things happen. And he's saying that we have to, right? What does he say? With wisest sorrow, think on him together with remembrance of ourselves. Line 7, right? He's saying essentially we have to get over it. And so he outlines his plan for dealing with Denmark, because as we know, there's talk that he outlines his plan for dealing with Norway, because we know that Norway wants to attack Denmark, and he seems to have Denmark's best interests in mind. And he says, so much for them. I wrote them letters telling them to back off. Okay. Um, all right. First order of business, right? Now, the question is he dealing with Norway effectively, or should he be more concerned? Is he kind of being cocky or arrogant in this moment, or is he being logical in writing those letters? Because again, if they're already thinking of attacking you, writing them a letter saying don't attack seems kind of counterproductive. So that's definitely a subplot that we're going to talk about. So the question is he handling that situation the best that he can? And one of those things we'll come back to as we move further in the play. Um, the second situation is Laertes. And he says, what would you ask of me? And remember, Laertes is Polonius's son. And Polonius, if they had a vice president, that would be Polonius. He's Claudius's right-hand man. And again, Claudius seems to be making the right decision, right? When he says, well, what does your father think? Your father's really important to me and to the state. And if your father thinks it's okay, then it's okay. So again, he seems to have Polonius and Laertes' best interest in mind, just like he seems to have Denmark's best interest in mind. This is something we're going to come back to as we move further in the play, and things happen. Again, I got to be careful here. I don't want to do any spoiler alerts. So now the third order of business that Claudius deals with is Hamlet. And when Hamlet first speaks, you'll notice Act 1, Scene 2, line 65. Page 22 if you have the No Fear edition. His first words are an aside. Notice how they're in parentheses. And when characters say something aside, they're saying it on stage, but no one else on stage hears them, right? So the only people that hear him are us, the audience, right? And obviously the readers, because it's not meant for the other people on the stage to hear him. Now, when characters are on the stage by themselves and they speak a speech, it's called a soliloquy. But an aside is when they say something on stage, but no one else is supposed to hear them, right? They're not the only person on stage. When they're the only person on stage, it's a soliloquy. When it's an aside, it's just meant for us, the viewers of the play and or the readers of the play. So right? What is Claudius? He says, "Okay, Laertes, go back to France. Take thy fine hour, Laertes. Time be thine, and thy best graces spend it at thy will." I don't know if you'd really say that to someone nowadays. If you were telling them they could do something, would you say, "Time be thine"? I don't know. Every now and then, when students ask me for an extension, I'll say, "Time be thine, and thy best graces spend it at thy will." And they're looking at me like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you remember Claudius?" Anyway, so again, he's saying, have a good time, right? This is your time to do what you want. But then he says, right, lines 63 and 64. I'm sorry, line 64. "But now, my cousin Hamlet and my son," he calls him his son. Now remember, it's his stepfather who's married his mom like a month to a month and a half. It hasn't even been 2 months. How would you feel if you were Hamlet? What's your worldview on the grace period? Did Gertrude marry too soon? Because she didn't do anything illegal. It's not illegal to remarry after someone dies. Obviously, right? Hamlet thinks it's too soon, right? And when we get to his soliloquy at the end of the scene, after everybody leaves, we'll look at what exactly he says. But Claudius calls him his son, S-O-N, and his aside is, Hamlet says, line 65, "A little more than kin and less than kind." Kin means what? Family. Notice how he's saying you're more than normal family because now you're my stepfather, you used to be my uncle, but what you did is less than nice. Shakespeare uses the figure of speech antithesis. When people use antithesis in writing, they set things up for contrast. More than one, less than another. So what you did made you more than family. But you'd think someone who's more than family would treat you really nice, would be really kind. So you're more than family, but less than kind. It's to emphasize the opposition of what's going on. So right off the bat, he uses the figure of speech antithesis. And then Claudius says, "How is it that the clouds still hang on you?" Meaning, why are you so sad? But he uses a weather metaphor. And Hamlet answers him with sarcasm. "Not so, my lord. I am too much in the sun." Now, it's interesting that he uses sun, but it's spelled S-U-N here. When Claudius said sun 4 lines up, it was S-O-N. So there's a couple ways to look at this quote. "I am too much in the sun," I think in one way is he's saying, he's being sarcastic, right? How is it the clouds hang on you? He's answering Claudius's weather metaphor, kind of with a weather metaphor of his own, right? Um, the second way to look at it is he using a pun, a play on words? He uses S-U-N to answer the weather metaphor, but could he also be sarcastically using S-U-N as a pun on Claudius calling him a son? Is he too much a son of his own father, the dead King Hamlet, for him to ever call him his son? Right? "I am too much in the son. I'm too much the son of my father for you to call me a son. I'm not your son. I don't want to be your son." Furthermore, another possible way that works with this whole "I don't want to be your SON," a lot of times when people were close with the king or the queen or the royal family, they'd say, "You're in the sunshine of the royal family," meaning you're one of them. They're your peeps. So is he saying, don't call me SON because I don't want to be in this family as your son. I'm too much in the sun. I don't want to be here. Right? So there's a lot of ways to look at it, but we see his sarcasm in the first two replies. And when people use sarcasm, it's irony tinged with bitterness or anger. They're saying the opposite, right? It's a figure of speech. So through the use of figures of speeches and sarcasm in just Hamlet, this is just his first 2 lines. We learn so much about the character. His use of language, Shakespeare's use of language is just fantastic with his use of figures of speeches, his analogies, his metaphors. Um, and we're just getting started. Notice how, as the dialogue continues, this idea of common, right? Hamlet uses the word common, meaning, yeah, what you guys did is low class. This is messed up. And they use the word common. Oh no, it's normal that when people die, you just move on. Why aren't you moving on? Why do you seem so upset? And this whole idea of seeming, just like Claudius seems to be a good king, um, again, appearances and reality are two different things, and Hamlet reacts very specifically to that on Act 1, Scene 2, lines 84. He says, I don't just seem upset. What do you mean? What do you guys mean? Why do I seem so upset? I am upset. I have all of this stuff inside that is outwardly being shown. I don't seem sad and melancholic. I am. What does he say? These indeed seem, he describes, right? That he's crying all the time, that he's dejected. He's essentially describing what? Anxiety and depression? And they didn't even have those words back then. So keep in mind that a lot of people feel that Shakespeare was writing about a lot of psychological concepts and conditions that are part of the human experience, mental illnesses, things like that. And they didn't even have the concept. You could write a paper saying Hamlet is depressed and suffering from anxiety, um, and suffering in some ways from panic attacks and things. I mean, he basically describes in Act 1, Scene 2, lines 75 to 86, what it's like to have anxiety, to maybe even have a panic attack, to have depression. He says, seems, madam? Nay, it is. I know not seems. I'm on the top of page 24 again, Act 1, Scene 2, lines 75 to 86. I know not seems. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother, nor customary suits of solemn black, right? He's mourning. He's wearing dark clothes. So he's saying, yeah, okay, I'm wearing dark clothes, nor windy suspiration of forced breath. He has the anxiety, nor the dejected behavior of the visage. He just looks sad. Together with all forms, moods, shapes of grief that can denote, the word denote means define. Denote me truly. These indeed seem, for they are actions that a man might play. But I have that within which passeth show. These but the trappings and the suits of woe. Now, notice how those last two lines rhyme. Whenever Shakespeare has something really important to say, he makes it rhyme. And that's really difficult to do. Try to talk in rhyme. Good luck. That's yet another reason why a lot of times he switches words around so the last two words in a line rhyme. Now, woe means sadness. It could also mean depression, right? And he's saying all of these things, the fact that I'm crying, the fact that I'm dejected, the fact that I can't really catch my breath at times and I have anxiety, the fact that I'm wearing black and I'm mourning. Yeah, these are all just the trappings and the suits of woe, the outward expressions. But I have that within which passeth show. He's saying over time, right? These outward manifestations show you that I seem depressed and sad, but I really am inside. Time has not cured me. The passage of time, that passeth show. Yeah, because a lot of times people say time heals all wounds. He's saying the passage of time has not cured me. I am still not just seeming depressed and upset, I am. So, of course, right, Claudius tells him it's unmanly grief, be a man. Obviously, we're going to look at this play from the perspective and all the plays from the perspective of gender and gender roles and masculinity and femininity and how people are supposed to act, and we'll then turn towards ideas of LGBTQIA roles as we get to the end of Hamlet and as we move into Macbeth and Othello. So there's a lot going on with gender and gender identity and stereotyping in some ways, right? Be a man, don't cry. That's what Claudius keeps telling him. So again, he agrees to stay, but he says, "I will obey you, mom. I will obey you, madam," because Claudius and Gertrude both ask him to stay, and he says, "I'll stay for you, mom." It's interesting. Again, he's kind of being sarcastic in some ways, or kind of ironically, right? He doesn't want to stay, but he's saying, I will stay, but I'm going to do it for you, Mom. He leaves out that he's doing it for Claudius. I think that's his way of letting Claudius know, I'm not doing this for you. And rather than saying, I'm not doing this for you, he tells him who he's doing it for and conspicuously leaves him out. So, in the interest of time, I'm going to stop the video right now, and then I'll get going with our final day 2 review lecture video of Hamlet's soliloquy, which picks up on line 129, Act 1, Scene 2. Stay tuned.